Hello everybody, and welcome back. I love the Mothman. This shouldn't be a surprise to returning viewers. I've had this hanging up for months now, so. I love cryptids just as a whole, but the Mothman has always held a special place in my heart. See, my mom lived in West Virginia for a time, so growing up, I just always heard stories about the Mothman. Not that she ever told me that she, saw the Mothman or anything like that, but it was always just something that I heard about since I was young. And recently, I had the chance to actually go to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the place where the Mothman myth originates from, and I figured since doing so, and since it's fresh on my mind, now would be a great time to talk about the Mothman, the history of it, the lore that comes alongside the cryptid, as well as its legacy all these years after its initial sighting. I have to say, the Mothman lore goes a good bit deeper than I thought it did, dealing with things like conspiracy with the government, as well as it potentially being an omen of bad things to come. So the widely agreed upon first sighting of the Mothman took place in the aforementioned Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It was November 15th, 1966, between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. Two couples were in a car driving home from a double date. They were driving past an old munitions factory that was used in World War II in an area nicknamed the TNT area. And there they saw a tall, dark, winged creature. It stood about 7 feet tall, had glowing red eyes, and was soaring through the sky. They were shocked by this thing that they saw, but were horrified to realize that it seemed to be following their car into town. And so as they drove down these winding roads, they would turn around and see this thing still in pursuit of their car. And occasionally they heard this loud, high-pitched scream coming from it. When they eventually reached the downtown area of Point Pleasant, they would turn around expecting to still see it in pursuit, but instead just saw that it was staring at them. And it did so for a while, those piercing red eyes just staring at the car, before it turned around and scurried into a field. Now, this story made its way around town until eventually ending up with the press, who wanted to interview the couples and ask for their stories. And they would write an article depicting what happened called "Couples See Man-Sized Bird, Creature, Something," where the couples would tell their story and even say that they intended to go looking for the creature again that day. Roger Scarberry, the husband of one of the couples, even made this illustration about what they saw. And from here, the legend of the Mothman was born. Reports kept coming in about sightings of this creature, now being dubbed the Mothman. There were over 100 in the span of a year. And because of the many stories coming in about it, people wanted to go find this thing and would go Mothman hunting. There was a common belief that somewhere in the TNT area was where the Mothman called home, or its nest, or whatever moths do. The two popular theories being that it was either at the old munitions factory or at the abandoned North Power Plant. So these areas were searched heavily in hopes of spotting this thing. Most sightings that came in amounted to I was driving and saw it fly overhead, or I was doing the dishes and looked out the window and saw it in my backyard. And reports would vary on what it looked like. Some said its body was more rounded and kind of owl-like, whereas others said its body was that of a human's. But there were consistencies with all of them. One, it was always dark in color, either being gray, black, or dark brown. It always had large wings and glowing red eyes. Additionally, it was said to be afraid of light. This is something that the couples mentioned in that first sighting, where they said that it seemed to avoid their headlights, and perhaps it didn't even go into the town of Point Pleasant because of city lights that may have been present. The couples also said that its eyes would only glow red when the lights would hit it, like the headlights of their car. So perhaps this could be some sort of defense mechanism for the Mothman, or at least sort of blind people from being able to see it better, because the eyes are said to be incredibly bright. Though the being afraid of light isn't the case in all sightings, and isn't really appropriate given its name, the Mothman, it's still a neat little bit of lore that I don't see people bring up a lot. Now, all these Mothman sightings only led to more weirdness entering the town of Point Pleasant. Between 1966 and 1967, the most active time in which Mothman sightings were occurring here, there were said to be strangers that visited the town. They were dressed in all-black suits, arrived in black cars, and would ask questions to the residents of the town about the Mothman and instruct them not to speak of it ever again. And these were dubbed the Men in Black. Men in Black have enough conspiracy and interest in stories to be their own video altogether, but they're basically said to be from the government or from some other higher power that shows up when people have seen something supernatural or extraterrestrial, typically pertaining to aliens or UFOs, to intimidate these people who have allegedly seen these things to make sure the truth about what they saw stays buried. And they're pretty much always dressed from head to toe in black suits, occasionally with like a black hat and sunglasses, but are always described as looking mostly human, though occasionally there's something off about them. It's usually either that there's something uncanny about maybe their facial features, like they have the wrong proportions, or even a lot of stories say that their skin is somewhat translucent. Overall, there's just something off about them. Now, given all of the sightings and the popularity of the Mothman, there were a lot of news stories being ran about these sightings. And one reporter who frequently covered these stories was Mary Hyre of the Athens Messenger. And because of her writing all these stories about the Mothman, she was apparently visited by the Men in Black. They would ask detailed questions about what she knew, and allegedly she would go on to tell a friend that the thing that freaked her out the most was that these men never blinked once during their conversation. The biggest event that the Mothman has been tied to, however, is probably the collapse of the Silver Bridge in 1967. It was about 5 p.m. on December 15th. The Silver Bridge that connects Gallipolis, Ohio, and Point Pleasant, West Virginia, is full of cars. The traffic's heavy from the after-work crowd trying to get home for the evening, but many wouldn't make it. A failure on the suspension chain would occur, causing the bridge to collapse and sending many cars down into the water below. 46 people died in this accident, and 2 of the bodies have never been found to this day. This was a tragedy, in every sense of the word. But what does this have to do with the Mothman? Well, some people apparently claim to have seen the Mothman flying over the bridge shortly before the collapse occurred, which has led many to believe that the Mothman either caused this or knew it was going to happen and was sort of trying to warn people. Because of this and some subsequent sightings, the Mothman has been believed to be a sort of harbinger of doom, meaning that if it shows up somewhere, something bad is going to happen. For example, even on just the Mothman's Wikipedia page, it mentions that there was an apparent Mothman sighting in Moscow, Russia, flying over apartment buildings, which took place shortly before the 1999 Moscow apartment bombings. And then, and I kid you not, some people claim to have seen the Mothman flying around one of the towers shortly before 9/11. I'm not touching that one. So if the Mothman is this harbinger of doom, like some people say, then they believe that the bridge is one of the first sort of incidents that would confirm this, since it was apparently sighted flying over it. And there are some that think the Mothman went down with the Silver Bridge, claiming to have seen the Mothman get caught in one of the suspension wires, or tangled up. Somehow or another, it went down with the bridge and ended up in the water, perishing as a result. And that this is why, following the bridge's falling in 1967, that the Mothman sightings dropped for a time. I'm going to save my thoughts as to why the Mothman sightings at least slowed down following the bridge's collapse for later. But next, tying sort of into the belief that the Mothman was there on the bridge, or at least had something to do with it, we're going to talk about the Mothman Prophecies by John Keel. This was a book published in 1975, and it was also adapted into a movie in 2002, also called The Mothman Prophecies, which stars Richard Gere. This book follows ufologist, however that'd be phrased, John Keel, as he went to Point Pleasant and investigated the Mothman incidents, connecting it to other unexplained things like UFOs. While the movie is a very dramatized version of the book, it also lends merit to the fact that the Mothman is either responsible or had something to do with the bridge going down. It seems as though his belief was that the Mothman acted as a sort of bad omen of things to come, that its frequent sightings in the year leading up to the bridge falling was a sort of warning sign for Point Pleasant. And once again, things are tied into UFOs, back to the Men in Black, sort of adding to his belief that the Mothman is a bad omen, and that all these other things, such as UFO sightings that were apparently prominent in the time, and the Men in Black coming to research, was a phone call that Keel received shortly before the Silver Bridge's collapse. He said that an individual going by the name Indrid Cole had called him, warning him that a disaster was imminent. This would have, of course, been the Silver Bridge's collapse sometime later. And Indrid Cole is another strange rabbit hole. It's this smiling figure that some believe to be an alien, some believe to be, similarly to how Keel views the Mothman, I think, as just a sort of bad omen, something placed on this earth to indicate negativity. It gets really weird, and I think I understood it, but Cole is just this looming figure who was there between 1966 and 1967, depending on who you ask. Said to be smiling constantly, which dubbed him the nickname, the Smiling Man. Indrid Cole's just another weird little pin to put into the big sort of conspiracy corkboard that is the Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1966 to 1967. Someday he may get his own video, or just get a mention in another video where we do a deeper dive into him. All of that just to say that Keel seemed to believe that the Mothman and all the subsequent things around it were just a sort of warning of bad things to come that amounted to the Silver Bridge. I also want to say, with all the Men in Black sightings, and there were some apparent UFO sightings or bright light in the sky sightings around this time too, that some think the Mothman was an alien. I don't have much more to say about that point, just do with that what you will. So, what do I think the Mothman was? Well, I've mentioned before on this channel that as much as I talk about all this creepy and supernatural stuff, I don't really believe in much of anything. While some things are certainly odd and hard to explain, I've never found a reason to believe in anything otherworldly or supernatural here. And I feel no different about the Mothman. I'm not saying people are lying saying they've seen this. I'm just saying that maybe someone thought they saw something once, and it got very popular, and then because you're either afraid of it or it's just in the back of your mind, you see something strange too, then you project what you thought it is, this being the Mothman, onto what's maybe just a large bird or some other animal that you saw in your backyard. So no, I don't think the Mothman's real. I think it just really became a big story after that initial sighting of whatever they saw. Maybe it was the Mothman. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm just skeptical as always. And similarly, I think that the sightings dropping after the bridge went down was just because that was a sobering moment for the community. 46 people didn't make it home that day. They weren't thinking about this giant winged creature with glowing red eyes. They were thinking that a tragedy occurred. And because of that, at least for a while, although the Mothman lore did end up going back to the Silver Bridge collapsing, after a time, people weren't seeing it because they were brought back to reality. Their mind wasn't in the sort of fun, creepy place that allows them to see something like the Mothman just when they see a shadow going by. And then, once some time has passed, spirits sort of lift as time heals the wounds, people start adding the Mothman stuff back in, because without the tragedy on the forefront of their mind, other stuff can come back, like the Mothman. And then the two, of course, kind of blend together to create the bit of Mothman lore we know today. I could be wrong. I'm not saying I'm right at all. I just don't necessarily believe that the Mothman's actually out there. I think it'd be sick if it was. I think I've said in other videos, like, I would love it if this cryptid stuff was true. That'd make the world just way more of an interesting place. But nothing's compelled me to believe in any of this stuff. But that doesn't mean I find it any less interesting. Now, the Mothman has had quite a legacy since its first sighting back in 1966. It's a huge cryptid like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. If you ask your friends, have you heard of the Mothman, they'll probably have said yes, just like they've heard of Bigfoot. It's still a massive cryptid. And because of this, it's still very prominent in pop culture all these decades later. For example, in the video game Fallout 76, the Mothman's in it. Additionally, cool stuff like this is for sale all the time on Etsy and eBay and stuff like that. And of course, starting in 2002, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, every year there's a Mothman festival. And I actually got to go this year. I went Saturday, I just got back yesterday, and it was a cool time. It's a lot of booths set up that are selling a lot of Mothman's merch. I did get some stuff, hold on. I went up to one booth, and they had like these little foam versions of various cryptids. It wasn't all just Mothman stuff. A lot of it was just horror, supernatural stuff in particular. And I'm looking at them because they're cool. And this girl comes up to me and goes, "Have you seen the butts?"
3 for $40.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thank you. And did you see the butts?
Pardon? And she spins one of them around to show that these things all are caked up. So of course, after that, I had to get them. So I got two. I got the Mothman, who does, I mean, he's got it. And then I got also what's probably my favorite cryptid, with the Flatwoods Monster. He does not have anything going on back there, which is probably a good thing. But another West Virginia cryptid. I love the Flatwoods Monster. I'm for sure going to talk about it at some point. But I got them just to kind of exist here in the background. I got to find a spot for them. So that was a lot of fun. I went with my brother, and he got some stuff as well, some shirts and whatnot. And it's a little wrinkly because it's been in a suitcase. But he got this. It says, "The Mothman ate my entire ass in Point Pleasant, West Virginia." So do with that what you will. My brother's a weird guy. I don't know what to tell you. And then one of my favorites, at one of the booths, a lady was selling Mothman romance novels. It is the biggest regret in my life that I did not buy these, but from what I could tell, there was a trilogy. So these books are by Paige Lavoie. I hope I pronounced that right. Who I believe was selling the books, and if it was, she was a very nice lady. But the books are called I'm in Love with the Mothman, I'm Engaged to Mothman, and then lastly, who can forget, I'm Getting Married to the Mothman. This is part of the Mothman in Love trilogy. Like I said, I did not buy them. The biggest regret of my life, but if you're looking for any Mothman romance in your life, the back of the first book is 22-year-old Heather is suffering from an epic case of burnout. So just like any other young influencer, she abandons her social platforms. Check. Gathers up her best flowy dresses. Check. And moves to a desolate cabin. Check. Heather imagines spending her #unplugged days trapezing through the woods and tending to her garden. However, her cottagecore fantasy is turned upside down when a wounded cryptid crashes into her roof and her heart. With no help from her internet followers and the local monster hunter growing suspicious, Heather's quiet life in the wilderness has suddenly become a little more complicated. To make matters worse, she thinks she might be falling in love with the brooding, winged man in her living room. Paige, if somehow you're watching, I am so sorry I did not buy these books. I wasn't familiar with your game. If it was who was at the festival, which I believe it was looking at the author's photo and whatnot, she seemed very nice. So if you want to support who I think is a nice author for some cryptid romance, then check those books out. Let me know how they are. Of course, the main draws of the Mothman Festival are the Mothman Museum, which we went in. There was a long line, which, I mean, is great to see that there's good turnout for this event. But once we got in, it's not the biggest museum, but there's plenty to see. A lot of newspaper clippings, just a lot of extra details about things, which was a lot of fun to see, and it was pretty cool. Got a few fun photos. And then, of course, there was the Mothman statue. It's this big silver statue of the Mothman in the middle of the town. And I got a photo with that, of course, too. But we saw there was a line for the back side of the Mothman, too, so people could take a picture with its butt. So naturally, I did that as well. The Mothman Festival was a lot of fun. I'd say that's the biggest example of the Mothman today, is that there's a festival about him, which is so much fun, just seeing people come together to do things like that. Of course, it's in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And that's pretty much all I have to say about the Mothman. I just really wanted to talk about it, like I said, with everything fresh on my mind, having just gone to Point Pleasant, and, you know, things like this, having been in my studio for months now. It just sounded like a fun video to make, and I hope you all enjoyed it too. I want to thank you all for sitting here listening to me ramble about the Mothman for however long this video was. And I also want to thank everyone. We just hit 75,000 subscribers, which is an awesome milestone. We are 3/4 of the way to 100,000, which, you know, would be an incredible milestone. Certainly trying to hit that, obviously. But just wanted to say thank you, everyone, so very much for that. That's awesome. And I really can't thank you guys enough. That's going to do it for today. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye.